I'm here to talk about building trust in an artificial age. Sounds a little scary, right? I promise it won't be. I want you to think about someone that you all trust. Go with me on this. Just take a moment, think about someone you really trust. What makes you trust that person? Maybe they show a genuine interest in you. They know your favorite things, they really want to hear how your day was, they really care about you, and you really have that sense of comfort with them. Maybe they do what they say they will. They show up for you, they make themselves available. If they say that they're going to help you move house, they actually turn up to help you move house. There's that reliability factor. Maybe they show up consistently in other ways. They're always there when you need them. They're the people that, no matter what happens, you always know that they're going to have your back. Do most of you think about a friend or a family member? Did anyone not? Interesting. Just a few of you. Okay. So we trust people who are really close to us. We trust people that either we've grown up with or we know on a friend level. Okay. Interesting. Do you trust me? Maybe. Maybe not yet. Well, interestingly, EV Conference trusted me today. They haven't seen my slides. They had quite an outline, but they didn't ask to vet what I was going to talk about, which is interesting. A lot of people do. So they must have trusted me in some respect. Why do we think that was? Is it my CV? Maybe. I used to work at Booking.com. I used to head up employer branding there. Shout out to the two people from Booking, wherever you are. I think you're speaking later. Great company, a lot of learnings. You know, running employer brand for 200 markets was kind of wild. So I feel you. Maybe it's because I've been running an employer brand and employee experience consultancy for about 5 years now. Could be, but I mean, a lot of people work in-house. A lot of people have businesses in this space, so why trust me to come and speak to you all and fly me all this way? Thank you for the amazing hospitality. I have a hunch it might be either a referral, so someone else who they trust, trusts me, or it might be because they sort of knew what they were getting. At least I hope they did. Because I always show up authentically and transparently as myself. Warts and all, embarrassing things. If I'm having a bad time with running the business, I talk about it. If I've got to a particular sticky point with a client, I often talk about it in an abstract way, not ruining confidentiality, but talking about something that I haven't quite got right or something that I'm trying to work through in this space. Sometimes I share memes. I try and be funny. Not always funny, but sometimes it works. You sort of know what you're getting because I've put myself out there in a really transparent way. I believe in truth and transparency so much that I named my consultancy after it. We are TheTruthWorks. This is our little band, and we're a consultancy dedicated to transforming workplaces, so communications and culture, with radical transparency and honesty. So we often talk to clients about showing who you really are as a business. Some are more comfortable with that than others. Do you trust me more now? A little bit. You know a little bit more about me. You know what I do. You've heard my CV. You've heard about all the embarrassing things I post. Follow me on LinkedIn for more if you want. I guess my question is, do we have to know someone personally to decide if we trust them or not? You all mentioned a friend and family member, but I've tried to build a connection with you here, and I'm someone that most of you have probably never come across before. And yet, by sharing a little more openly, it's easier to connect. Do we trust this guy? How about these guys? Maybe some of you do. Maybe some of you don't. But we've formed a perception, an opinion, of whether we trust these people, whether we'd want to work for them. We don't know them personally, but we have an idea. How about this guy? Does anyone know who this is? Yeah, Stephen Bartlett. So I did go down a wormhole last night looking for Romanian influencers, but it took too long. I ended up reading about all their dramas and scandals and breakups, and I was like, no, it's okay. Take a step back. Plus, I didn't want to get the wrong person and offend. So we've gone with safe old Stephen Bartlett. He makes a very successful business building connection. When he posts a job saying, anyone want to be my intern or videographer, people jump. Millions of people apply. And he's able to sell products off the back of building this trust and this connection. People really feel like he's showing them something of himself and his business, and he's built a respect. So there are people who perhaps we don't know personally, but we create a connection with them. How often have you felt when you're listening to a podcast, I could really be friends with this person. If only I met them, they would really connect with me. They're really speaking to what I feel. We often feel that sense of connection when people put themselves out there in their content. It also influences our buying decisions. Just look at Book Talk, for example, which has exploded. People choosing to buy a book because they've seen someone read and cry and get excited and feel romantic and fuzzy about the book they're reading, and they've shared those experiences with you. So when we open up, we create that connection, and we actually derive value and influence from that connection we've created. So we don't have to know someone to be influenced, but we do have to connect with them to build trust. So now I've taken you on a rambling journey of the influencer sphere. Let's put this in the context of the employer-talent relationship. How do we think the influence is there? How do we think the trust is there? Is it getting better? Is it getting worse? Do we trust our employers? Did the pandemic help? Maybe for some of you, you felt really supported. Maybe for others of you, you've been through layoffs, or something's changed, or you were promised that you could work from home, and now you have to return to the office, or your leader said one thing and then they did another. Those are all incidences of where that trust and that connection maybe get broken. So every year, I'm really interested to read the Edelman study. I don't know how many of you read this. They do a global survey on trust, and they've done this for 25 years. So you can see the trends, you can see the changes, and they survey 33,000 people across 28 markets. And what's been interesting this year is they've seen an unprecedented decline in global trust between employer and employee. So the questions asked is, I trust my employer to do what's right. And usually this is pretty steady. It's been pretty steady for 25 years, and this year it went down. The fear that leaders lie to us is at an all-time high. Now, this might surprise some of you, this might not. And the question asked was, my employer purposely misleads people by saying things they know are false or gross exaggerations. Now, unfortunately, business leaders are there around the sort of level of government leaders and journalists and reporters. It's not looking good for anyone in the sphere of trust at the moment. This report is free to download on their site, by the way. I'm not repping them, I just find it an interesting read. So do have a look, and you can get all these stats there and all the data that went into these reports. 63% fear being discriminated against, and this has gone up as well, whether that's on race or sexuality. So we don't trust that we're getting a fair hearing either. And this impacts the media we use as employers as well. Only 42% trust social media for news and information. Facebook has decided that it's self-moderating now. Think about how that impacts your employer brand. Can you trust the stories that are out there about your company? Can talent trust what is on those sites and what's in those spaces about you? And only 40% trust owned media. That's things like your website, your internal comms channels, channels that you own, that you manage, that you run. 47%. That's wild. So trust is fragile in an era of political shifts and rapid changes in technology. Is AI part of the problem? We've obviously seen a lot of change in the last 6 months, and it's only going to get faster. So is AI part of that problem? There is a disconnect, right? This idea of artificial intelligence, but then we want authentic connection. Can we ever create that artificially? And it's a bit of a race to the bottom, isn't it? We have candidates using AI, employers accusing them of cheating, employers using AI to monitor their employees or monitor what candidates are doing. Where does that end up? It's sort of this zero-sum game, right? We're each competing to be, to use technology faster than the next person. What does that do to that trust relationship? But perhaps we're missing a trick. One of the things I found most interesting in the report is that trust in artificial intelligence is actually higher in the developing world than in the developed. So if we look at, for example, the UK, Netherlands, other European countries down this end, I don't have a breakdown for Romania, I'm sorry, that's not on me, their report. But there's this huge gulf between, say, your sort of US and Europe, and then where places like China, Nigeria, India are. Do they know something we don't? Why do they have this trust in artificial intelligence that we don't? Who says it's black and white? I've been reading a lot about how AI has been used in therapy. So I don't know about where you are here, but in the Netherlands, in the UK, where I'm from, it's very difficult to get access to therapists. You're on long waiting lists, you're desperate for help, and actually a lot of people have turned to AI. And if you think about it, that you don't have to worry about a time slot. You can access that therapist anytime. They get to know you through what you've been telling them. They never forget or have to check their notes because they're being programmed specifically on what you've told them about your life. They're pulling from all different sources and theories of therapy. It doesn't cost you anything. There's no waiting list. And people are actually creating these genuine connections with their AI therapists. So if we have a level of trust that we're prepared to open up this much about therapy, about our deepest, most innermost fears and feelings, why couldn't we create that trust in an employer-employee relationship using AI as a tool? Maybe it's not the technology, maybe it's our poor understanding and use of it. So imagine that kind of connection being created for talent or put into the HR space. Getting support which is consistent, legally compliant, on brand, responsive, empathetic. How many of us as HR leaders are able to provide that constantly, given how stretched our resources are? There's something in that. So maybe it's not about AI or humanity, maybe it's about being more human using AI. Could we use AI to help our business do all of those things we said at the beginning? Can it show a genuine interest in me? Sure, it can get to know me, right? It can ask me all the right questions. Can it do what it say it will? Can it show up consistently? Maybe. Let's imagine for a minute you're applying and actually the technology knows you. The platform's got to know you. It has data. It's able to respond and say, do you know what? From what I know about you, you'd actually be a better fit for this role. Imagine if we could do that internally as well. You're in this field, but have you considered XYZ role? Your skills are a much better fit. It's like the great careers advisor you never had. Maybe you want to do a trial run of your interview. We have a lot of neurodivergent people who find the interview process very stressful. Why not have an avatar, an AI twin of the interviewer run you through the interview questions, respond to what you say, use the pre-programmed questions and discussion guide that you've already created for that human interviewer? Why not create a digital version of that interviewer? Why not understand what that person's needs and drivers are? Insight's one of the greatest things we can have about our candidates. Just as you show your preferences when you're shopping and people recommend things to you based on what you might be interested in and what you might like to hear more about. Imagine if, as an employer, I'm interested in flexibility. I'm interested in solving complex problems. I'm interested in, hearing more about a very specific benefit. I can then drip feed you that content once you're in our system. I can start to tell you things that I know you want to know and build on how you respond to that content instead of always relying on an interviewer to send a pre-populated one-size-fits-all pack. This is Dubai chocolate for anyone that hasn't had this spamming their news feed every single day. I can't look at any more of it, so I'm sorry I've put it in this deck. Imagine if we could be more responsive to what's trending right now in the world of employer branding and employment. If we were on the pulse and we had a feed of what our competitors are talking about, what other benefits are being promoted by everyone else. We have access to much more insight. We can be responsive to what's happening in the market. We can serve different messages. Imagine if instead of sending your CV into a black box, you can see the back end. You can see if it's been opened. You can see if it's been read. You can see exactly where you are in that process. All of that creates trust, and it's not done by humans. Or a personalized feedback message. If I'm starting to record the interviews and using AI to collect interview notes, how hard is it to turn that in seconds into personalized feedback, to go in the email for why you didn't get the role? Now, these things are not rocket science. They're not talking about things that can't be achieved today. They're all things that are possible. It's not about the platforms. I think there's still a lot of HR platforms catching up to what's possible. But this is possible to do within AI chatbot software. This shouldn't be too far off for us to be able to think about how we can leverage the AI to make ourselves more human as employers and create a deeper connection. We could maybe be more timely, more personalized, more relevant, in fact, more human than many current recruitment processes. This was on my LinkedIn yesterday. This was a real response someone got. So for those of you that don't read English, it says, "Hi, Demetra, add text, best wishes." And this was notifying her that a position had been put on hold. So look, we're not always getting it right. It's hard. It's hard to do these things at scale. It's hard to be human at scale. One company that I think is using this in an interesting way, and I have no evidence they're using AI apart from the M-dashes and the fact they've managed to do this sort of Q&A, FAQs in such a human way at scale, which I don't think a copywriter would have sat down and done. There's a company called Buffer. They have an FAQ section. It's very human. The questions are asked in a very personal way. They're a remote-first company. So they talk about things like, how do you know if people are unhappy about something work-related if you don't see them in the office? And the answers are very human, very personal, very relatable, very real. Even answers questions like, don't you get lonely? Honestly? Yeah, sometimes. So they've been able to scale their employer brand in this way, to answer questions in a very human way. Speaking about their benefits, weaving in things, but actually able to do this at scale. So how do I train AI to drive greater connection to my employer brand? So it starts with being clear on who you are, because you can't tell the truth at scale unless you know what that truth is. Because as we know, for anyone who plays around with AI, the output is only as good as the input, right? If you write a great type brief with loads of insight, you get something great back. If you say, write me some funny LinkedIn posts, it doesn't always deliver. So we have to build a consistent and cohesive brand from the inside out, and you have to really mean it. So we often get asked to start with employer branding, and people will say, oh, I just need some employer branding and an EVP. I'm like, okay, so who are you? Tell us who you are. And they'll sort of list some benefits, or they'll say, we're about the people, or a great place to work. I'm like, okay, but how do you show up consistently? And what is the core truth at the heart of your organization? Because actually, that's more what people will see. Then we can talk about communicating what it means for talent. So we always start with what we call the truth triangle. This is actually quite simple, but most employers find quite confronting to fill in. So we talk about your vision. Who do you want to become? Like, where is this company going? What's the big idea here? Why do you exist? Because we do it by. So how do you do it every day when you come to work? We're on a mission to do what? Without compromising on. What are the values, the key principles, the key beliefs that you will not compromise on your way to achieve that vision? And then what do we commit to? How do we show up day to day as a result through those behaviors? To get there, we will. Cool. What's the strategy? And that can change and that can shift. But ideally, those other things stay fairly fixed. And then how do we know we're getting there? What are the goals? What are the measurable things? And actually, if you can communicate all this for talent, you're already a pretty strong way towards building that authenticity, but also being ready to talk about what it means from a branding perspective. Because the best branding should be built on those core truths. You shouldn't start there. You should know who you are before you start thinking about how we express ourselves or how we show up in any situation. So from those core truths, you can start talking about your employer branding. Why work for us? Your customer branding. Why buy from us? And your corporate branding. Why invest in us? Why believe in us as an organization that's going to make money over time? Or do good things in the world, whatever it is you're here to do. Hopefully both. If you start with this framework, even if you put this basic amount of information into AI, then it's got something to work with. It knows, okay, these are your values, so this is how you're going to show up consistently. This is how you're going to react to a certain situation. This is how you're going to deal with a market trend, because you know who you are. Ideally, those three branding elements are also built off the same core master brand. And again, that's easier to do if they're all built off those same core truths. Because truth and connection are not built through one-time marketing efforts. They're earned through consistent actions over time. Tell this to anyone setting your employer branding budget who says, okay, so you've done your EVPs, that's it, yeah? Cool, great, you've done it. Have we won everyone over yet? Is everyone staying? Is everyone coming? Great, okay, because we did the employer value proposition, right? No, it's not how it works. So we need to make sure that we are living and breathing our employer brand and our core truths over time. I put this post up every single year. For anyone that follows me, I'm sorry, because you'll have to see it again. But every Black Friday, I post this belief that running recruitment ads once a year during a hiring peak and doing no employer brand building the rest of the year is basically the equivalent of running a Black Friday sale when no one knows anything about your products or what you're selling. It's like, guys, it's on sale. Okay, but who are you? I don't care. There's no demand. You haven't built that demand up over the rest of the year. It doesn't work. And if you don't show up consistently, the harsh reality is there is no internal, external anymore. And when I say this to internal comms people, they slightly freak out. Doesn't mean you don't have internal comms channels. But what I mean by this is the boundaries between what employers are happy to share, whether that's in a private conversation, on a Reddit thread, screenshotting your town hall meeting Q&A, is becoming thinner and thinner. So this idea that you keep things contained inside and you can show up one way outside and show up one way inside is unrealistic. And there's increasingly nowhere to hide. So if you say, we have a great focus on DEI, you're all, I assume, thinking and talking about the EU Pay Transparency Directive, which I think is by 2026 in Romania, which will soon force you to put your actual money where your mouth is. So it's no good saying that you believe in DEI if you haven't addressed a pay gap and you're forced to transparently show that you have a gender pay gap, for example. And we saw this play out in the UK, so we had an advantage on you all, is we learned our mistakes the hard way, so that you all don't have to. Some clever techie women actually created the gender pay gap bot. So the UK had to do this, I think, 5 years ago, before Europe decided they were going to do it wholesale as well. And what happened was, when all the people, all the companies tweeted, it was Twitter back then, about International Women's Day, the gender pay gap bot would scrape the data from their public pay reports and say, in response, retweeting the company's post, this company has a 75% gender pay gap. Hastily, everyone took down their International Women's Day post because it was really embarrassing. There was nowhere to hide. So you've been warned. Maybe you talk about being a fast-growing rocket ship. Well, those well-publicized layoffs you just had to make tell a different story. Think about what you can commit to. Think about if your message and your truth has longevity or if it's a short-term promise. We care about our people as individuals, but we have a 5-day-a-week return-to-office mandate. And we all know what happens when people say, we're a family, when you're actually a business. Anything your leaders say can be held against them. Learn the lesson of the Leave Pity City CEO. Did anyone see this? It's a little bit old, but it traveled far. So she was talking about no staff getting bonuses, and she did an internal teleconference, basically saying, you'll have to leave Pity City and get over it. You know, I don't make money, you don't make money, etc. So needless to say, their employer brand messaging around empathy and care went out the window. And whistleblowing is on the rise. We have people like Sarah Wynne-Williams of Facebook, of Meta, waiving their NDAs and saying, I would rather lose my career than my humanity. I would rather tell the truth about what's happening in my organization than feel like I'm living a lie. When you're consistent, you also know who you're for and who you're not for. And what I think it's important to say is it's not about making everyone happy. It's not about painting a picture that everything is perfect. It's just about being truthful about who you are for and who you are not for. And actually, that builds trust. Colleagues get it. They know what they're signing up for. Don't know if anyone saw this campaign, Don't Work at Anduril. Anyone see it? Show of hands. It's well worth a check out if you haven't. So Anduril are a defense contractor in the US. They are rigorously patriotic. You have to believe in American values, and you have to want to show up as a patriot. And they also do real hard work. It's hard work, hard problems, hard mode. So they ran a very honest employer branding campaign recently, which got a lot of heat and pickup. They actively talked about no work from home. We come into the office 5 days a week. We're often, doing physical, manual work with these big machines that we have to work with. It's not for the faint-hearted. It was really honest, and it got picked up just because people were kind of shocked by the honesty. And it's probably a problem for the diversity and the inclusiveness of their organization. But at the same time, they know who they're hiring for, they know who will succeed there, and they're being honest. So they're not going to hire anyone under a false pretense of, it's all hearts and rainbows, and then someone comes in and realizes, oh wow, you really, really have to drink the Kool-Aid to work here. It was out there, so if you didn't read the warning, then you missed the boat. And telling the truth builds trust with your audience. Think about the people, again, that you follow who've been honest about a mistake they've made. It makes you respect them more. And the reality is, this is true of almost every culture, right? Sometimes it's good working here, sometimes it's shit. This was also an actual employer brand campaign for an ad agency. Really, honesty is having a moment. There's something powerful in the idea of being equally well-versed in the strengths and weaknesses of your company. So a lot of people brief their recruiters, brief their hiring managers, okay, here are all the good things about working with us, just say these things. But actually, it's really powerful to know who you're not for and to verse those people in the weaknesses. Where are we not as strong? Be honest about it. We're not as flexible as this competitor. If that's what you're looking for, go there. You know what? People can be really direct here. It's hard sometimes if you're a kind of person who feels quite sensitive and prefers a more empathetic style of communication. That's not us. It's okay to say those things. We often shy away from it. Your employees often put it best. This was one Glassdoor post from what it's like having Elon Musk as your CEO. Insanely intense magic. Maybe they don't feel that way anymore. But there is something interesting and balanced in that, right? 3 words, you get a very good sense of that culture. Like, okay, it's going to be insane, it's going to be intense, but there will be moments where we send a rocket up into space, and that will feel great. The rest of the time will be intense and insane. It's what it says on the tin. We work with one client who's in the dairy industry who often gets difficult questions at family barbecues. They said, all of our colleagues, with this great insight, all of our colleagues are talking to friends and family, and they're getting really difficult conversations, in moments where they least expect it about, well, aren't you actually evil? And isn't it really difficult to work in that environment? And so they created barbecue guides for their colleagues. They said, look, let's acknowledge that a lot of conversations about our employer brand are happening in spaces that we're not in control of. And it's also really confronting and difficult for our colleagues, who presumably are here because they feel that this is a great place to work. You would hope so. So let's help them answer those difficult questions honestly, but with some of the other facts that might counter that perception or that narrative. So support your colleagues if you are in a position where there are things publicly about your company that might make it difficult for people to reflect and represent your employer brand. I'm nearly done, I promise. I'll let you ask whatever you want. I'll promise to try and answer it. So what's our personal role in building trust and building employer branding? The reality is, from what I showed you about what's happening with social media, is you can put out all the polished content you want, but actually, I think this will be true of all content creators, not just ones in employer branding. Talent will trust individuals, not platforms. So your CEO starting to build trust, your employees starting to build trust, and build up a reputation for saying what they mean, for doing what they say they will, and being public about that. That following that they have will trust them more than what you put out in terms of polished content. So start making that move to advocacy now. And there's a huge advantage in leveraging your employees. According to the same report from Edelman, more people trust a regular employee than a CEO. Now, that might not surprise you when you've seen the fact that most people think CEOs are lying to us nowadays. That employee voice becomes increasingly important, and it has to feel authentic, and it has to feel true. So a few key takeouts to leave you with. Trust has to be earned. We are not starting from a default position of trust. We are starting from a place where most people actively mistrust their employers and their leaders. Use AI by all means, but use it to be more human. Use those insights to connect on a deeper level, to be more responsive, be more personal, be more real. Always sell the truth, because what's the point if you don't? You just attract people through a revolving door, and they leave because they find out it's not true. And employees ultimately will still have that greatest influence over your polished content and even over your CEO. If you want to hear more, you want to connect with me, my co-founder and I run a very punchy podcast, which is always an interesting listen. You can find it on LinkedIn. It's quite new. And on YouTube. We also talk a lot on LinkedIn. There's a lot of content. Not so much on Insta these days. We're rolling back our meta usage, but we're there. So yeah, love to hear from you, love to connect with you all. Always happy to come and speak truth to power at your organizations. It's our speciality. We do it very tactfully, but very directly.